Hello, and welcome to
Small talk about the big issue. I'm Kiara.
And I'm Lorraine.
Now that we've established how fast the ocean is really rising, let's move on to the next hot topic: how to stop our oceans from becoming too acidic. And we have a few answers for you.
Yes, I'll provide a general framework to understand ocean acidification, what it means in terms of physiochemistry, but also what impact it can have on marine life and how we might measure it. And I'll try to be as brief as possible because I know Kiara has some breaking news for us.
Yes.
So
It's, of course, not the news you want to hear, but the news you have to hear. And I'll be telling you about something very important that has happened in these last few weeks.
Okay.
So stick around until the end.
Yes. So diving right in, I think the first aspect that we need to understand when we address the question of why our oceans are becoming acidic is, what does it mean to be acidic? So stick around for a bit of chemistry. We measure acidity with pH, and that's a scale that we have that goes from 0 to 14, where 7 is neutral pH, so most drinking water will be around pH 7. The ocean average is pH 8.1, and everything that is higher than pH 7 is basic. So if you think of household items that you might have used or come in contact with, bleach, for example, is pH 14. And then on the other side, anything that's lower than pH 7 is acidic. So pH 3, for example, is vinegar or lemon juice. And what you'll notice very quickly here is that these pH extremes are not really livable. We use bleach and vinegar to clean and disinfect. Now, this pH scale is the inverse of the hydrogen ion concentration. So the more hydrogen ions there are, the more acidic a liquid becomes, the lower its pH.
Do we want to maybe freshen up people's minds about ions? Because I'm not sure everyone knows what an ion is. What's a hydrogen ion?
Oh, that's a good point. A hydrogen ion is basically just a proton.
Yeah.
Now, what's a proton? So most of the things that you will touch today aren't charged. And that's because most kind of stable molecules are made up of an equal balance of positive charges, protons, and negative charges, electrons.
And an ion is a molecule that has either gained or lost a few or just one electron. So if you lose electrons, then your overall charge will be more positive than it was before. You turn into a positive ion. If you gain electrons, well, then you turn into a negative ion.
And a hydrogen atom is quite unique in the sense that, all atoms are unique, but and a hydrogen atom is especially interesting, let's say, because it has one of each, one electron and one proton. And so if it loses that electron, it turns into basically just a proton is left.
Yeah. And that's what we call the hydrogen ion.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't think I would have thought of defining it. And so the link to climate change is that CO2 that we emit in the atmosphere, which we've discussed on here loads already, can become dissolved in the ocean. And that makes the water more acidic. Now, how does this happen? Again, just a little bit of chemistry. Water and carbon dioxide can combine to form another compound that's called carbonic acid. And this weak acid can break down into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. So it basically separates into things that have a positive charge and things that have a negative charge. And as I said, the pH scale is linked to the hydrogen ion concentration. And so this drives a decrease in the pH. And so since the Industrial Revolution, for example, we've had a 0.1 pH unit decrease in the ocean pH. Now, this doesn't sound like a lot, again, but that's about 30% of the pH decreasing in 2 centuries.
Wow.
So that's not incremental change at all.
We'll get back to this in the second part in the article because they've refined some of those calculations.
Oh, okay. I'm glad I touched on it. The second point that I wanted to bring up is, okay, so the pH is decreasing. What does that mean? What does that do? And one of the more dramatic impacts that it has is on marine life, because a lot of marine organisms, which are called calcifers, depend on hard shells for survival. So if you think of corals who have exoskeletons or oysters that have shells, these are made by combining calcium and carbonate from seawater. And what ocean acidification does is it makes carbonate ions less available, because carbonate ions are negatively charged, and so they will bind with the excess positively charged hydrogen ions. So basically, ocean acidification steals the building blocks of these shells and exoskeletons from the organisms that need them.
That is dramatic.
It really is. It really is. And if the pH gets, much, much lower, the shells and skeletons can start to dissolve under the action of this acidic liquid that these organisms now have to live in.
Yeah. And what is so cool about these calcifer organisms is that they're one way that the ocean has to store carbon. Because of increased acidity, there's less carbonate ions available, so they can incorporate it less into stable forms. And so the carbon just stays, never gets fixated.
I think that's a really important point to bring up. Again, another positive feedback loop with very negative consequences. Now, it's very important that we act to reduce the pH of the ocean.
Wait, quick correction from the editor. Of course we don't want to reduce the pH of our oceans. What Lorraine meant to say is that we want to reduce the acidification of the ocean, not the pH. This changes everything and can be a bit of a mind gymnastics trick, because in order to reduce the acidification of the ocean, we need to increase the pH. It's what we call a negative correlation. Sorry for the mix-up, and enjoy the rest of the episode.
If we keep going on as we are now, predictions are that we will reach a surface water pH of 7.8 by 2100. Currently, we're at 8.1. So that's a very fast decrease in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
The last time it was this low was in the middle of the Miocene, which is about 14 to 17 million years ago. Earth was several degrees warmer, and also a major extinction event was happening.
So it can't be good.
No, it can't be good. So I think it's very important that we address this question: how can we stop ocean acidification?
Yeah.
So before we discuss solutions, which again, stay tuned until the end, I want to discuss how we can measure ocean acidification. How do we know to track it? And we do this by looking at calcium carbonate in the ocean, especially one of its most soluble forms, aragonite. And this is widely used by a lot of the marine calcifers that I've discussed, so corals and shelled organisms. Now, we can't look at the absolute amount of aragonite in the ocean because that may be influenced by how many calcifers there are in the ocean, so we'd get a biased measure. So instead, we look at the aragonite saturation state, and that's how easily aragonite can dissolve in the water. And that's an indirect measure of the carbonate ion concentration.
So the more acidic the ocean is, less aragonite will be available, because all of the hydrogen ions will form bonds to that aragonite and prevent it from being taken up by calcifer organisms, for example.
Yes, exactly. And so hopefully, now that we understand what it means to be acidic, why the oceans are being acidic, what impact acidification has on marine life, and how we measure it, you can discuss the very important news you'd like to report on, Kiara.
Thank you, Lorraine. Well, I have some pretty big news. I don't know if you've ever heard of the planetary health check.
I don't think I have. I can infer what it does from the name, but please give me detail.
It's a report that assesses the current situation of our planetary boundaries. So I'll get to what planetary boundaries are in a second. But I just wanted to say that the latest planetary health check came out 2 weeks ago, I think on the 24th of September. So this is why this is also new.
Okay.
And one of the dramatic news, I think the highlight of the report, was that the ocean acidification boundary has been crossed for the first time, and has been crossed for a while now. So this requires you to know what a planetary boundary is, I guess.
That was my question.
They're defined as 9 Earth system processes that keep our planet stable, resilient, and make it able to support life.
Okay.
So there's quite a list of them, one of them being freshwater availability. There's also biodiversity, there's climate change, and there's ocean acidification. And each of these Earth system processes has a threshold, which is somewhat of a safe operating space. This is the limit we want to stay within. Because if we cross the threshold, we increase the risk of losing Earth's ability to absorb shock and damage. We step into a zone of unknown consequences and loss of stability.
I'm assuming the consequences would be uncertain and probably disastrous for natural ecosystems, but does this also include physically, we don't know how Earth systems would cope?
Yes, we know a great deal about Earth's systems and how it's able to keep a stable state because it has quite a big buffer in a lot of areas, just like carbon capture of the oceans. The ocean takes up a lot of carbon. Well, we know how reliable it is within a certain extent. But if we push the boundaries of the system by introducing too much CO2 into the atmosphere, then we reach a level of uncertainty in the sense that we don't know how the system will react after some point.
Okay.
We don't know how sustainable it is if we push it to such extremes.
Okay. So we want to stay away from these extremes.
Yeah. And so after that uncertainty range, we've already surpassed with a few planetary boundaries. There's the high-risk line. This is something that scientists defined for every single one of these boundaries as having dramatic consequences. And this line has been crossed for a few of them already, such as the nitrogen cycle in the environment, the radiations leading to climate change, or the loss of biodiversity. All of them are already above the high-risk line, which means there's also a sense of irreversibility.
Yeah.
So, going back to ocean acidification, one of these boundaries is about ocean acidification. If at some point acidification becomes too intense, it could cause irreversible damage to marine ecosystems and the services they provide, as you so well introduced in the first part, Lorraine. And this report, 2 weeks ago, announced for the first time that we have crossed the boundary for ocean acidification, which means we are now in the uncertainty range, which is not somewhere we want to be.
No, not at all.
So I want to present the article that led to this discovery. It was published in June 2025, and it's called Ocean Acidification, Another Planetary Boundary Crossed. And so to understand this article, you have to know what the boundary was based on. The boundary said that the safe limit was all the way up to a 20% drop in aragonite saturation state. So 20% less available aragonite than compared to pre-industrial levels. That was as low as we could go and still be pretty sure that it could be reversible and sustainable. However, this new study revised the pre-industrial baseline based on new models and refined this number, and use this to compare today's aragonite level to this pre-industrial revised state of the oceans.
So that means that we don't necessarily have a better understanding of aragonite saturation now.
No.
Just a better understanding of what it would have been pre-industrial level.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so what they found is actually quite drastic. They found that the ocean had already entered the uncertainty zone of that 20% threshold around 2020. So 5 years ago.
Okay, so it's breaking news, but it's been happening for a while.
It's been happening for a while, we just weren't really aware of it. But what they did on top of that is that they quantified what it meant for key species in the ocean. And they looked at the habitat loss that this acidification caused. And they found staggering numbers for coral reefs. This increase in acidification led to 43% loss of suitable habitat. For coastal bivalves, which are clams and mussels, they're talking about a 13% loss. But for polar pteropods, which are tiny sea snails and sea butterflies, that are also key species in their environment.
Sea butterflies, that's so cool.
Yeah, we've witnessed a 61% loss of habitat due to this increase in acidification.
Yes, and I had read up about this as well. I think we've seen the largest decreases in aragonite saturation in tropical waters, but actually the decreases in colder areas might have potentially more devastating effects for the ecosystems there because they tended to have lower aragonite saturation levels anyways to begin with.
That's very true and worth mentioning. So, having looked at that habitat loss, the authors actually recommended a stricter boundary for the acidification, given that it has such dramatic impacts on so many key species. They claimed that an appropriate boundary for acidification would have been only a 10% decrease in aragonite saturation state. Like in the entire surface ocean was already past that boundary by the year 2000.
This is interesting because if you consider that the actual boundary would have been 10%, it means that this ocean acidification stability boundary is actually really quite sensitive. If in 2000 we were already past it. Yeah, so not all of these boundaries have the same level, have the same threshold. Some of them were crossing much sooner than others.
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely think that this was some crucial news to share today with you because its consequences have already been present for the last decades, but they're going to keep increasing as we release more CO2. And I think I'm getting ahead of myself because we wanted to answer the question, how to stop ocean acidification.
No, I think people will be very happy to hear the answer right now.
And hear it again and again. Well, Lorraine, do you want to answer? What's our shot? What's our chance?
Is stopping carbon emissions. And I think we're going to be repeating ourselves very often. But if we go back kind of full circle to the very beginning of the episode, ocean acidification is driven by the fact that CO2 dissolves in the ocean. Yeah. And we're releasing too much of it. And so the way to stop ocean acidification, good news is it's very simple. We need to stop emitting carbon. Maybe bad news is that's a lot harder to do than it is to say. Yeah, absolutely. But we really do need to do it because acidification has a wide range of consequences, starting with the loss of marine life, but also the ocean's ability to take up carbon in those calcifer organisms, which cannot take up that carbon anymore if the building blocks are missing. Yeah, basically, if the ocean is a key regulator of the climate and we're destabilizing the ocean, we can't expect it to be able to continue to provide that function. I think that's a strong finish. As usual, we like to leave you with something to read or something to go check out in your own time. So I would definitely recommend you read the Planetary Health Check of 2025. It's very well made. I don't know if there's a summary for policymakers, but that usually tends to be, I think there is. It usually tends to be easier to read with a bit more colors and less text. So it's a great way to summarize their findings. And I think it's very accessible. And very important science. Yeah. You could also have a look at the other planetary boundaries and the state they're in right now. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out, Kiara. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, or feedbacks, we're very happy to hear them, either in the comment section of wherever you're watching this, or you can send us an email directly at smalltalk.bigissue@gmail.com. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Goodbye. We fact-checked this episode, but we have nothing to add. So see you next time.